Before the break, I talked with Michael Kroger about how weak the Albanese government been in reacting to the Hamas terrorists. Well, here's another sign of weakness, because there's a growing pattern here, isn't there? A really worrying one. China has just threatened us again, very directly. Just before Saturday's election in Taiwan, a democracy that China says it should take over, a China ambassador to Australia, he warned us not to encourage Taiwan to think it's independent, or else. He said if Australia is tied to the chariot of Taiwan separatist forces, the Australian people would be pushed over the edge of an abyss. Now, what other country threatens us like that? It's so juvenile. And listen to these thugs now. For many months, China's been trying to intimidate the Taiwanese, threatening war, sending fighter jets into airspace controlled by Taiwan as if they're really going to attack this time. But the Taiwanese on Saturday still voted for a new president who was the most anti-communist China of the three candidates. China's foreign minister was furious, and again with these bully boy threats.
Taiwan has never been a country. Anyone on the island of Taiwan who wants to pursue Taiwan independence or split China's territory will be severely punished by history and law.
And what is the Albanese government's response to the communist dictatorship's threats to us here and to the Taiwanese? To this outrageous bullying? Nothing. Silence. Joining me is the panel, Federal Liberal MP Garth Hamilton and Steve Chavura, Senior Lecturer in History at Campion College and co-author of The Forgotten Menzies. Now, Steve, start with you. China threatens us, no response from this government, smart politics or weak?
Well, it's both, because there's nothing stopping Albanese from even the mildest rebuke and reminding China that we are actually a sovereign state and we can relate to other other regions the way that we want. But also, he's probably got in the back of his mind the fact that China cancelled all our wine trades back in COVID when Scott Morrison demanded an apology for China's caginess and secrecy around that, and demanded an investigation. So there's that going on as well. But Labor will always be weaker when it comes to China because they're divided on the AUKUS alliance. And as long as Labor has a close arrangement with the Greens, they will always have trouble being as close to America as the Liberal Party and the Liberal Coalition would like us to be. So Labor's always going to be weak when it comes to China.
Garth, what do you make of this, Garth Hamilton?
Look, I think China's made its assessment of our Prime Minister. They see him as someone that they can bully around and who won't speak back to them. So you were right, there is a pattern of behaviour we're seeing, and I think we can expect it to continue. I would add to this the injuries caused to our naval divers not that long ago, that our Prime Minister did everything he could to shirk any responsibility for having to speak up and defend on their behalf. So look, I think this will continue. Sadly, China's not going to change their path, and clearly Mr Albanese is not going to change his.
Now, Garth, let me stay with you for a second. Tax cuts. The Albanese government now says, yes, it's going to deliver the promised stage 3 tax cuts that are due in July. Those cuts include creating a single tax rate of 30% for all earners between $45,000 and $200,000. So, it's not just the rich that are benefiting from them. But the government still won't specifically say if it will also pass on the tax cuts it promised for anyone earning more than $200,000. Should it?
Oh, look, of course it should. These are tax cuts that I support. This is about flattening out our tax system. And quite bizarre to suggest that you're going to have a flat system below one level and then a completely different system above that. They really haven't thought this through. But look, this is just a distraction. Mr Albanese is doing everything he can to pull out of this. He doesn't want to deliver these tax cuts. And despite his forced yes that he's given, that he will hold through to this, I don't trust him on this, and I don't think most Australians do. This is not his bread and butter. This is not what he wants to do. This is a high spending government, and they want those high taxes to keep that going. That's what's at play here.
Well, speaking of that, Steve, for families where both parents are on $80,000, the tax cuts will mean a total saving of $1,750. But that doesn't even make up for the bracket creep caused by inflation since the last tax cut. You're actually paying much more in tax because your wages keep getting pushed up and the tax and to the tax brackets. And the top 1% of taxpayers, they're now paying such a bigger and bigger share of the total tax cut. I mean, just look at how much more of the burden they're carrying despite all the screams that the rich don't pay their fair share. Do you think the rich in Australia deserve their tax cut too?
Well, it's both fair and it's smart. I mean, there is no good reason to discriminate against the rich because they are rich. But the other thing is that when you give tax cuts to those who are earning over $200,000 a year, a lot of that money goes straight back directly into the economy through purchasing goods and services and things like that. It's much better to get the money into the economy via a tax cut for those earning much more money than to put it back into a bloated bureaucracy so it can bounce around there and then a trickle of it goes back into the redistributive welfare state system. So it's a very, very good idea actually to pass that tax cut on to everyone, regardless of what they earn.
I think the fundamental question has always got to be asked, who can spend your money best, you or them? But the Liberals too, Garth, I've got to ask you a hard question here. I mean, shouldn't they be making some promises of their own to get back their reputation for being good economic managers? I mean, that reputation sort of went out the window when they spent massive amounts of money in government. Now, it is true, a lot of it was because of the pandemic to stop us going into recession. I got that. But what do they need to do now?
Well, I think we need to have an honest conversation with Australia. Being responsible economic managers means dealing with the issues of the day, and those have changed dramatically just in the last couple of years. But we can see an economy tightening. We can go into households around Australia and people are having to make tough decisions on how they're going to spend their money. I think they expect to see a Liberal government that's willing to make those tough decisions too. Government spending today is over $100 billion more than it was pre-pandemic. And yet somehow Jim Chalmers has got away with using words like restraint and budget repair in the press to describe what he's doing. He increased spending by $188 billion and everyone looked back and said, yes, that sounds like restraint. It's nonsense. We need to call it out. You can't be a government that we would propose to be that is low taxing and be high spending. Those two things don't work together. Now, the conversation needs to be about who do you trust to make those reductions? Who do you trust to do that fairly to ensure that the hourglass economy we're experiencing, where middle Australia is getting squeezed, doesn't become more and more unfair for the working poor? And that's a position that we need to take as the Liberal Party. I think we need to be strong and open about it.
Well, maybe Australians, though, Garth Hamilton, have got used to the idea that there's an endless pot of money and it doesn't matter how much in debt you get, the sun still rises in the morning. The Liberals might be too scared to say they're going to cut this or that. But Steve Chavura, I tell you what, they could cut spending to the ABC and that'd be good for the nation. I can't believe this. Yet another ABC staffer is accusing the ABC of racism. Now, I discussed it last Thursday, because we'd already had Antoinette Lattouf, a Lebanese Australian, suing the ABC for sacking her as a fill-in radio host for being an anti-Israel activist. She said, oh, this is racist. You had ABC presenter Dan Bushier, who identifies as Aboriginal, saying he'd suffered racism at the ABC. Presenter Stan Grant accusing the ABC of institutional failure and not defending him. Asian Australian reporter Jason Holmes saying he'd been disappointed by the ABC's treatment. Unnamed Aboriginal staffer complaining of racism there, said it was worse than anything online. And since then, now, Lebanese Australian journalist Noor Haydar, she's resigned from the ABC saying it doesn't support culturally diverse staff. And she's unhappy with this coverage of the war in Gaza, which, by the way, she's been extremely critical of Israel in her online feed. What is going on, Steve Chavura, at the ABC? Is it racist as all get out or a victim of its own culture war?
Exactly. I mean, I would be shocked if there weren't accusations of racism all throughout the ABC, because they hire woke journalists who come out of woke universities who believe that racism, systemic racism, microaggressions are everywhere. The ABC reinforces that and tells them that it's all true. Of course, at some point they're going to start saying when their careers aren't going as well as they think they should be going, or when they don't feel that they're getting the support from the ABC, when they attack Israel or when they attack Australia or the monarchy and they get a bit of a pile pile on social media, of course they're going to say, oh, it's because of racism, it's because of my skin colour. So I'm not shocked at all that this is happening. One thing I will agree with all these people on, they do say that ABC's obsession with diversity is all humbug. I actually agree with that. When you go onto the ABC website, which charts its diversity metrics, the one diversity that really counts for the ABC they do not have, and that is diversity of opinion. They do not have that. They'll talk about diversity of gender, of race, of disability, of all other things. But the thing that really counts for Australians is diversity of opinion. They are not remotely interested in. So on that, I agree with them, that the diversity in the ABC is pure humbug.
Oh, it's got much, much worse since the days that Gerard Henderson and I, for instance, were regular commentators on the ABC. That's got long past. All right, Garth Hamilton, I'm going to put the wood on you here. You say the Liberals should establish their financial credentials. Should they include cutting some of the financing for the ABC?
Well, look, I'd love to see the ABC get a bit of a haircut. Maybe put Peter Credlin in charge. There you go. That's my first proposal. But if you want to save a bit of money, we probably could have saved a bit of money on the referendum we just had, or the wages of the Assistant Minister for the Republic, who's no longer going to be doing anything. There's some cuts I'll propose straight off the bat for you, Andrew. I'm sure we could find more.
I think the ABC, in this online world where everyone's got their own favourite news source and they increasingly are paying for it, their choice, the ABC should be part of that world. Let it be a subscription service.